These things differ from time to time, but each acts in a similar manner and with similar human physical traits. But they are more reminiscent of beasts of burden, even though I can spot some flicker of humanity, with scars and marks on their skin and body, as if they ever been self-mutilating. They even look dead. I fail to see humanity in them. They are bent on finding me, but somehow they refrain from killing me. Instead, I'm hung from one of those dreadful hooks. I keep asking myself why they don't snuff the life out of me themselves, but someone must control them. Might they do someone else's bidding? I keep trying to understand them at the same time as they stalk me. I try finding something that can pinpoint their purpose. I wonder if they might be punished. But in that case, am I not in the same position, being punished for something, as I try to escape and find some way out of here? They play their role without any diversions. They're like a machine that is set on finding any living soul. Are they without hope? Who do they serve? Is there even a master? I have never seen them rest or stop. They hunt until the hooks are occupied, but where do they go after that? Trying to find some answers is one of the few things that keeps me sane. For now, if you stumble upon one of these beings, you must run, and you must hide, without any sound. Evan Macmillan idolized his father. It wasn't just that he was heir to a great fortune, it was the way he ran the estate, raised under his firm hand. Evan had taken to running the workforce with an iron hand. Production was always high, and the Macmillan Estate prospered under father and son. As Archie Macmillan's mental health slowly disintegrated, Evan protected him from the herd who wanted a piece of the fortune. No matter what his father asked of him, Evan would do. When Archie Macmillan finally snapped, Evan became his enforcer in what would become known as the worst mass murder in modern history. It never proved that Evan led over 100 men into those dark tunnels before detonating the explosives and sealing them to their fate. The tale of the Macmillan Estate is a tale of wealth and power gone very wrong. How many victims fell to the hands of father and son is unknown. No record is ever made of what became of Evan Macmillan. His father is another unsolved puzzle, found trapped in the locked basement of his own warehouse, starved and abandoned. Philip Ojomo came to this country without anything than hope for a new beginning. He was happy as he got offered a job at Auto Haven Wreckers, a small scrapyard where bribed cops turned a blind eye for the somewhat shady business that took place. Ojomo didn't care. He had seen criminal activity up close in his homeland, and as long as he didn't get involved, he let things be. He just fixed cars and handled the crusher, something he did really well. A car went in, and a small metallic cube came out. It was not until one gloomy day that he, just by accident, saw some blood coming from one of the uncrushed cars. As he opened the trunk, he found a young man, gagged and with tied hands and panic-filled eyes. Ojomo freed the man, who managed to run 10 feet before Ojomo's boss stopped him and slit his throat. As Ojomo demanded answers, he got explained to him that he'd been nothing more than a simple executioner, as more or less every car had a soul in them, as this was a service the scrapyard provided to certain clients. Ojomo snapped and went ballistic. He threw his boss in the crusher and let it slowly compress. As the head stuck out, Ojomo grabbed it and pulled the head and spine out of the body. Then he left. I was never seen again. The son of wealthy landowners Max Thompson Sr. and Evelyn Thompson, this unnamed boy was an unwanted child born to savage parents. Hideously disfigured, he was shut away from society. So ashamed of their son, they bricked him off into a room and fed him through a hole in the wall. When the boy escaped, he took his revenge savagely and terribly, slaughtering the parents that had tortured him instead of raising him. After the deed was done, he continued to live his life at the farm, taking out his deranged violence on the animals that were allowed to run free. As he finally broke free from his shackles, he ran through the cornfields, chasing and slaughtering whatever he could find. They never found the bodies of Max and Evelyn, but they did find tortured and disemboweled animals all over the farm. Cold Wind Farm was quickly settled, and the land split up and sold off. There was never a buyer for the farmhouse. Perhaps it was the sound of the chainsaw you could hear throughout those hot summer nights. Sally Smithson came to town with dreams of children's feet and laughter in a wooden home built by her husband Andrew. But life came not with smiles but with plans of destruction. Andrew worked as a lumberjack, a job with its perils. One day, Andrew's foreman had to pay Sally a visit, forever changing her life. She was alone. Without food on the table and no other option, Sally had to find a way. But the only employment she could get was at the Crotus Prehn Asylum. Nobody sought employment there unless they were in dire need, just like Sally. Without any education, she started at the bottom, doing a hard night shift. Over the years, her mind had reached its limits. 2 decades of seeing horrid things that violate the eyes. Memories that are replayed every night, being abused verbally and physically by people without limits. Sally saw her insanity from the outside, just to catch it herself. Finally, she could not take it anymore, and concepts of purification emerged inside her. She did what she felt was necessary. As the morning staff arrived one day in September, they found over 50 dead patients, lifeless, in their bed along with 4 staff members also dead. Only Sally had survived the night, but her mind was gone, rocking back and forth non-stop. Exactly what happened is only known by her, but it seems that some of them had been choked, so they had marks around their necks. They got her into an ambulance. The ambulance never reached the hospital. It was found crashed in a nearby wood, all the staff dead, and Sally nowhere to be found. Some humans are simply bad seeds, seeds infused with a distilled and pure form of evil. Michael Myers is one of those seeds. He had no issues with causing pain of others. Instead, it was exactly what he sought. But even life can be tough on those with minds filled with terror. The difference is just how one goes about to solve those problems. For Michael, he had to kill to find some inner peace. As he took his sister's life, the police found a silent boy dressed as a clown at the scene. When one stumbles upon a growing fire, one does not pour gasoline on it. But this was an action taken by officials that had no idea how it would shape this demon in the boy's body. Sending Michael to a mental institution was a feeble attempt to save the child. Unsuccessful therapy and nightly screams just made him even more introverted and deranged. People hoped that Michael Myers would end up a parenthesis, soon to be forgotten and buried, a failure that soon were to rot away. But then, he escaped. Lisa Sherwood grew up in a quiet village, mainly isolated from the rest of civilization. The people of the hamlet were kind, and the elders kept old traditions alive, often keeping the peace by personally settling the ever-rare disputes. Lisa was particularly fond of the charms they taught her to draw for safety and good fortune. One night, as she was walking home through the woods, a terrible storm struck without warning. Howling winds whipped at her hair as she stumbled through the swamp. Her rain-drenched dress plastered to her skin. In the slick, wet mud, she lost her footing, careening backwards and striking her head against rock. Slipping in and out of consciousness, she strained to identify the dark shapes approaching her from between the trees. It's the last thing she could remember. Her kidnappers kept her chained to the wall in a flooded cellar. Though dimly lit, she could see others whose large open wounds swarmed with flies. It took merely a day before they returned, carving chunks from the prisoners' bodies with rusted blades, consuming their very flesh down to the bone. Most she saw did not survive long once the cannibals targeted them, but somehow, deep within, Lisa persisted. Starved, infected, and mutilated after several weeks of torture, her gaunt arms became loose in their shackles. She pulled hard, the metal tearing through skin and muscle until she was free. Her flesh oozed viscous yellow pus, and bones were visible beneath gangrenous wounds. She could go no further. Delirious, she thought of home. She thought of the elders. With her dying breath, she etched the symbols they had taught her into the floor using what remained of her fingers. Almost in response, the dark hunger stirred inside her. It yearned for blood. In oath, she chose vengeance. The villagers' search party eventually brought them to an old shack in a swamp. Inside, its previous inhabitants had been viciously dismembered and devoured by an unidentifiable animal. In the cellar, amid rotting corpses and disconnected flesh, the elders' charms were scrawled in blood on the floor. Lisa's body was not among the bodies and was never found. The village was never the same again. As soon as Anna was able to walk, her mother started teaching her how to survive a harsh, solitary life in the northern woods. Living in such an extremely remote and dangerous area required skill and resilience. When sunlight became too dim for productive activities, they would take refuge in their house, a sturdy old cabin constructed to resist the toughest winters. Close to the hearth's warmth, Anna would rest in her mother's arms, surrounded by the few wooden toys and masks she had crafted for her. Drifting off to sleep with stories and lullabies, she dreamt happy dreams, ignorant of the events that would soon change everything. Anna and her mother were stalking a great elk through the woods. They knew it was dangerous prey, but it had been a particularly difficult winter, and they were almost out of food. The spectre of starvation frightened them more than any forest creature. Without warning, the elk reared, bellowed, and charged at Anna. She was paralyzed with fear as the whole world seemed to shake under the immense beast's pounding hooves. The elk was close enough for Anna to see the murderous fury in its eyes when her mother threw herself in its path, axe in hand. A blood-curdling scream escaped from her lips as the elk impaled her upon its antlers and hoisted her into the air. With all her strength, she brought her axe down on its head again and again while it tried to shake her loose. With a sickening crack, the antlers snapped, and Anna's mother was free. The beast collapsed. Anna was too small to move her mother's broken body, so she sat with her in the clearing where she had fallen. To distract her from the dying elk's cries, Anna's mother held her and hummed her favorite lullaby. They stayed like that, the huntress and the elk getting quieter and colder, until Anna was alone in the silent forest. Eventually, she stood up and started the long walk back home. Still a child, she knew just enough about life in the frozen forest to survive. She followed her instincts and became one with the wild. She got older and stronger and practiced her hunt. As she grew into a dangerous predator, Her humanity became a half-remembered dream. She widened her territory and lived off her hunts. She worked her way up through squirrels, hares, mink, and foxes. Eventually, she grew tired of them and hunted more dangerous animals like wolves and bears. When unsuspecting travelers came through her woods, she discovered her new favorite prey: humans. Unlucky souls who strayed into her territory were slaughtered like any other animal. She liked to collect their tools and colorful garments, and especially toys when they were little ones. But she could never bring herself to kill the little girls. The girls she would take back to her house deep in the woods. They were precious, and looking at them woke up something deep in her heart. She craved the closeness of a loved one, a child of her own. Among the pillaged wooden toys, dolls, and storybooks she couldn't read, the girls would be tied by the neck with a rough and chafing rope fastened firmly to the wall. She couldn't let them wander off, or they would surely die outside. Every time, the girls would waste away and die of cold or starvation or sickness. Every time, it plunged Anna deeper into pain and sorrow and madness. She was compelled to try again and started raiding the nearest villages to slaughter families and kidnap their daughters. She wore one of the animal masks her mother crafted for her so many years earlier to try to calm the frightened children. Villagers spread the legend of a half-beast lurking in Red Forest, the Huntress, who killed men and ate little girls. War eventually came to the forest. German soldiers began to pass through on the march to attack the collapsing Russian Empire. During these dark times, there were no more travelers. The villagers had abandoned their homes, and no more little ones to be found, only soldiers. Many of them were found with violent axe wounds. Whole groups disappeared mysteriously. Once the war was over, the rumors of the Huntress disappeared with it, engulfed by the Red Forest.